Thanks everyone for joining us and welcome to another season of our ongoing series Co-op Conversations. My name is Janielle Maxwell and I am Professional Research Associate at the Canadian Centre for the Study of Co-operatives here at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon, and your host and moderator today, filling in for our director, Marc-Andre Pigeon. I acknowledge I am coming to you today from Treaty 6 territory, land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, and Dakota for millennia, and traditional homeland of the Métis. We are grateful for this opportunity to work on this land and reaffirm our commitment to the hard, shared, and very necessary work of reconciliation. Last week, what are believed to be 93 unmarked graves were identified near the former Beauval Residential School in northern Saskatchewan. Our hearts ache for the families whose loved ones never came home. We echo the call to action made by Chief Wolverine, the Meadow Lake Tribal Council, and the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, Métis Nation Saskatchewan, and the Office of the Treaty Commissioner to address the long-standing injustices suffered by residential school survivors and ensure history never repeats itself. The roots of today's co-op conversation are entwined in decolonization and reconciliation work, delving into using a justice, equity, diversity, decolonization, and inclusion, or JEDDI-centered approach to support small and medium-sized enterprises in their conversion to cooperatives. Our speakers delve deeper into the phenomenon of co-op conversions through a discussion of the Jedi Business Conversion Project, led by the Canadian Worker Co-operative Federation, a project that provides multifaceted support for business conversations among equity-denied groups, EDGs. I apologize in advance. I do have a bit of a cold, so I am a little scratchy today. But thus, I am delighted to be here and to introduce our featured speakers today, who are at the center of this effort. First, since September 2022, Janielle Maxwell has been serving as the Jedi Business Conversion Project Coordinator. Janielle is a passionate advocate for racial empowerment, equity, and the socioeconomic progress of marginalized groups. Janielle is also currently pursuing her master's degree with a research focus on Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC, farmers, small-scale agriculture, and food security, which we're very interested in as well. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Juliet Kego Ume-Onyido. Juliet is a co-founder of the Black Women Professional Cooperative. Among many other leadership roles, she is a co-founder of the Whole Woman Network. Juliet is a passionate social justice advocate for gender equality, quality public school education, and financial literacy and empowerment programs. Before we jump into hearing these amazing women speak, a word on our co-op conversation series. Today, we're doing things slightly differently than we usually do. Our featured speakers will be presenting for 30 minutes, and this will be followed directly by us breaking out into group discussions around a question which our speakers have posed, and we will get to know each other over those breakout conversations for about 15 more minutes. 15 minutes after that, sorry. So one of the things we hear repeatedly about this series is that cooperatives and allies and people who are involved in this sector value these opportunities to network. These breakouts are meant to make that happen, to be enriching for you as individuals and humans, but also in your capacity in your organizations. When we reconvene, we will regroup, share, and wrap up our conversation today. If anyone is experiencing technical difficulties, please message Stan Yu. Stan, can you wave?
Hi, everyone.
Stan will be able to assist you. You can message him directly via chat or send him an email. We will be recording this session and the link will be shared with everyone who registered for the event. All of that will be emailed to you sometime after today's talk. Now, our speakers, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for that warm introduction, and thank you for powering through. I know you have a cold. Thank you so much. You did a great job. We can share the slides now. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. As was stated before, my name is Janielle Maxwell, and I do want to apologize. I am having technical issues with my camera, so I just have my picture there. If I were to turn it on, you just see a camera with a line crossed out. So my picture will be my representation today. But I hope the summer has been treating everyone really well so far. Here in Brampton, Ontario, we've actually had some surprisingly warm weather for the past few days. So that's been a nice end of summer surprise. And I do want to take the time to welcome you all to this session. Thank you so much for your attendance, and thank you very much for your interest in this topic. It means a lot. And so as stated before, the presentation today will be by myself, just for a smaller portion, and the rest will be covered by Juliet. And we can proceed to the next slide. All right, so here is a session overview of what we'll be talking about for the next while. I'll give a brief background to the Canadian Worker Co-op Federation and who we are, as well as a backgrounder on the JEDI Business Conversion Project. And then Juliet will do a bit of a deep dive into points 3 to 6. And we'll try not to, but we may end up using some abbreviations. So just feel free to take a quick screenshot of that section below for reference later on if we do end up using any abbreviations. And before we move on to the main content, I do want to ask everyone present to please complete 2 poll questions. That first link, Stan, can be shared in the chat now. And these questions just really help us figure out who our audience is today. The project does really target members of equity denied groups and those interested in business conversions to social purpose organizations. So if you could take the time out to respond to those 2 questions, it would be really helpful. And I think I'll just allow 30 seconds for that. Has the link been posted in the chat, or should I go ahead and share it? I also have it.
If you have it, Janielle, can you kindly share it? Sorry about that. I may have missed
No
that in the notes.
No worries. It's been a while since I sent the email. All right, the link is now in the chat. If I could just see some thumbs up for those who are finished responding to the 2 questions, that would be great. And then when I see a bunch of thumbs up, we'll move on. Okay, sounds good. And if you didn't have the chance to do that now, you can always fill those questions out later. Next slide, please. So who are we? The Canadian Worker Co-op Federation. This is commonly abbreviated CWCF, so you may hear us using that term as well. So like the slide says, we are a national organization with the main goal of supporting the growth and development of cooperatives all across Canada. And our vision focuses on supporting democratically controlled worker co-ops with an emphasis on just, sustainable, and healthy local economies, right? And we believe that themes such as mutual aid, resource pooling, diversity, decolonization, we believe these things are very important in achieving our goals. And you'll see that these themes are explored in depth a little bit later on. And some of our current initiatives include the Common Good Capital Program, which is a registered plans program for social purpose organizations, co-ops, nonprofits, etc. Another one of our current initiatives is the Worker Co-op Academy, and of course, the JEDI Business Conversion Project, which we're here to talk to you all about today. Next slide, please. All right, so the JEDI project, JEDI stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, Decolonization, and Inclusion, long term, but our abbreviation is JEDI. And this project will extend the work of the Legacy Leadership Lab, which was conducted by the Waterloo Institute for Social Innovation and Resiliency. So that's what WISER stands for. And there was really some amazing work done during that program to educate on business conversions to social purpose organizations, co-ops included, and the ability of conversions to help mitigate the silver tsunami, Canada's business closure dilemma, and other issues such as climate change, Indigenous reconciliation, racial justice, and business sustainability. And our project really focuses on education, outreach, and conversion support to those who are current business owners, to those thinking of purchasing a business or selling one, or simply individuals that are interested in business conversions to social purpose organizations. And recognizing that there is a lack of engagement from equity denied groups, from marginalized groups within the co-op sector and the social purpose organization space at large, this project seeks to connect with these communities and the business owners therein to help facilitate conversions from traditional businesses to social purpose organizations, to improve access to a knowledge of conversion resources, and to develop a shared toolkit and an ecosystem for co-op and social purpose organization sustainability. And we do know that many members of equity denied groups have practiced cooperative economics and mutual aid since time immemorial. However, over the years, these practices were often overlooked in favor of seemingly more sophisticated financial models that were imposed by colonialists. And so this project is empowering communities through the revitalization of such cooperative economic practices that better connect individuals to a sense of purpose, mission, cultural alignment, and at the end of the day, human dignity. Our JEDI Business Conversion Project offers both educational and financial support, and it will also connect those pursuing conversions to service providers and experts, such as co-op developers, accountants, and lawyers. And we know that these folks are essential parts of a successful conversion. And we will also provide early stage consultations to those pursuing the conversion process. And so in summary, the overarching goals of this project are to facilitate business conversions to social purpose organizations, largely co-ops, and to raise awareness of the collective power within this model. And on the screen, you can see some photos from past project events. Top left, we won the JEDI Initiative of the Year Award at the Co-op and Mutuals Canada Annual Congress. That's the picture there. And then at the bottom, we have mixed pictures from the CMC Congress, others from our BIPOC keynote that took place at our conference session last year. And then bottom right, we have a picture of all of us, sort of a nice happy selfie there. And we had a presentation at the Canadian Association for Studies in Cooperatives. They had a congress happening at York University this year. And so we attended that and presented as well. And those are some of our pictures of the initiatives that have been going on throughout the project. Next slide. So here is a timeline of our JEDI conversion project for your reference. I'm not going to dive too deep into this slide, and I'm sure we can email around the slide deck later if you want to look at that a little bit more in depth. This is just for your reference currently, but as of right now, I will pass it over to Juliet, who's going to add some context to a lot of the themes that I brought up earlier. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Janelle. So if I can just have the next slide. Thank you. Thanks a lot, everyone, for being here. Really excited to, take over from Janelle. And I love that she's giving us that backgrounder. And so what I'm going to be talking about will really be from the lens of being co-founder of two cooperatives. So the first one, the Black Women Professional Co-op, and then Whole Woman Network that's in the final stages of converting to a worker cooperative. And I do also want to acknowledge that there are people that are not in the room with us, especially when we're talking about equity denied groups, that the prism through which I speak is not representative of all the different groups. So it's just bringing that awareness to fore. I am Nigerian Canadian and haven't moved here some 25 years ago to Canada. And so that also shapes, the perspectives that I'm going to be sharing. Next slide, please. And so I think Janelle really talked a lot about, in terms of these cooperative practices already being inherent in equity among equity denied groups, right? And so based on that, I just want to quickly share in terms of our values, right, as Whole Woman Network and Black Women Professional Cooperative. There are some values that speak to that. And I'm going to just focus on two of them. Actually three. So Indigenous wisdoms, for instance, we really pay attention, right, to the reality that a lot of times Indigenous wisdoms are often exempt or not fully acknowledged in the capitalist model that we run. And so for us, that's something that we refer to in how we build our frameworks, in how we implement policies, even from governance to our operations. That's really important. Another is the celebration of beingness. Celebration of beingness for us is really acknowledging that when equity denied groups are often spoken about, it's often from a lens of deficit, right? Often from a lens of lack. What do they need? What can we do for them? How do we help them? And for us, we think that framing needs to change. It needs to change because we're not just the story of our traumas. We're not the story of what we don't have or what we've been denied. And so the celebration of beingness is acknowledging that. It's saying that for every member that comes into our cooperatives, we see them as whole beings, right? And we recognize that the totality of who they are deserving of dignity. You don't have to perform. You don't have to be, this always excellent to the point that when you're not deserving of dignity. And so for us, we celebrate that. We make sure that we encode in our practices, even in our operational policies, that rest is a key part of that celebration. So for us, this axiom of rest as revolutionary, rest as not something that you get because you did something good, but rather as part of the work culture, that people are allowed to receive the dignity, right, as human beings and be able to give their best on their own terms. And the final thing I really want to talk about in terms of our values and guiding principle is the subjugation of capital. And I know that in the cooperative sector, this is really something that we pride ourselves on, right? That we're able to put people first before profit. It doesn't mean that prosperity is not a part of the equation, because we also talk about shared prosperity. But subjugation of capital is us understanding that capital should work for us. The current capitalist model, which is the dominant system, really elevates capital to the point that people are enslaved to capital, right? So for us, it's having that awareness as a board, as members, even with our vendors, so that it shapes how we go about, whether it's accessing capital, how we use it, how we deploy it to other members, and even in some of the programs that we run that I'll talk about later, the alternative financial model that we use. Next slide. And so from that lens, that kind of background, I now want to talk about the affinity of equity denied groups to social purpose organizations. Like Janelle talked about this when she said that the cooperative model, the values, the principles, these are things that are lived experiences for us. They are not new. So, and a quick example of that is this movie, Atatsikut. For those that haven't seen it, highly recommended. It was screened at the recent CMC event at Ottawa, and also I know that CWCF, the Canadian Worker Co-op Federation, also screened it. So both at the Congress and at the screening. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it for your cooperative, for your board, because it allows us to see how a group of Indigenous people, right, in Nunavut, how they pulled their resources together based on cooperative principles, Indigenous principles that really aligned, right? And which really speaks to the point that these are not new practices to us, right? And so the lens that I'm going to use to look at this are 4 different lenses: the historical context, the sociocultural context, economic, and political. Now, if you look at the historical context, right, and look at even the civil rights movement, a lot of emphasis is often talked about the civil rights in terms of fighting for right, but the economic justice part of it, it's really rooted in cooperativism. How slaves the enslaved people rather got their freedom is rooted in cooperativism. They pulled resources together to pay for each person's freedom. They pulled resources together to get access to land. And so you have people like Fannie Lou Hamer, for instance, with and so many other, Josephine Baker, and so many others that really show us that cooperativism has always been a way of life. And if you look beyond the civil rights and even go farther to slave, the whole slave trade and colonialism, and even the way that Christianity was introduced to the different countries that were termed, colonies, you would find that this new system displaced or demonized existing cooperative models, right? As far back as 1897, there's an account by an enslaved person that got his freedom of how communities, for instance, from the eastern part of Nigeria, where I am originally from, how they pulled together, whether it was agriculture or weaving or creating crafts, right? People pulled together all their resources and they made sure that everyone had access to those resources. Again, if you look at sociocultural context, right, the Ubuntu model is really about leaving no one behind, which really translates again at Altsikut with the Indigenous community, right? That same common theme of a collectivist society. When we also look at alternative finance models that we run, and which is really prevalent across many Afrocentric communities, Roskas, in some communities, they're called Susu or Isusu, Hagbad, like different countries call it different names. But what Roskas stand for is the Rotating Savings and Credit Association. And it's really a group of people coming together, pulling their funds together. They agree to put a particular amount. It can be weekly, monthly, quarterly, and then they rotate that fund, the bulk amount, to one person at a time. So Roskas are alternative finance models, but it's also a metaphor for the culture of a lot of equity denied groups, right? And what that metaphor really is that the community comes together, pulls together, and at each instance focuses on one person. It's not just about the financial exchange. It becomes more about people coming together to talk about their challenges, to talk about, to brainstorm, and then use collective wisdoms, collective knowledge to solve problems, right? It's also, there's a social dimension to it where people are not isolated. So a quick example for that is in the Canadian context, for instance, poverty is seen as something to be ashamed of. There's a demonization that happens of poor people, right? Either they're looked upon as poor because the capitalist model extracts, right? It's exploitative. So anyone who's not cutting it is seen as maybe they're not performing at their, at peak. They're not, there's a reason why they're poor. And so they're shamed for that, instead of the systems that a lot of equity denied groups, like a lot of pre-colonial African communities, even indigenous communities, the way they see poverty is a collective responsibility, right? They understand that if the systems are in place, people won't be poor. So for instance, in my culture, the word for poverty is obenye, a poor person. Obenye translates to someone who the community uplifts. So inherent is the idea of dignity, that it is a collective responsibility to put systems, laws, institutions, structures in place that uplifts everyone. And so the term Atatsikud or Onyaga na Nwanne, which really means leaving no one behind, right? And that flows into the economic affinity, because when you have that, it means then that you can build businesses, right, that cater to the needs of the community. And you're not just focused on maximizing profit. However, in the capitalist model, the challenges that a lot of equity denied groups face, and I'll speak specifically to people of African descent, is that most businesses are run as family businesses, and they don't have the structure, the structural, the capacities, the capabilities, the systems to grow beyond generation. So a lot of those businesses die out. And so when we talk about the social purpose organizations and why equity denied groups should really look to taking advantage of what is inherent in it. This is one of that core example where you can learn how to build structures and systems and access the capital you need to create sustainable businesses. And for the political affinity, I think overall, I want to point to how leadership is structured in using the Afrocentric lens, right? For instance, eldership is something that's valued. So the idea of wisdoms, of passing on systems and frameworks through storytelling is a part of the culture. And if you contrast that to the Western system, like in the global North, getting older is something that's looked down upon. There's an ageism context in addition to all the other, classism and patriarchy and misogyny that cuts across. But ageism is so prevalent here in that people that are older, we don't, and not just people that are older, but even women in particular that are older, we see a lot of discriminatory practices against them, right? And so for us, it's also this idea of whether it's from the equity denied groups in the global South, here in Canada, that are living here, Indigenous community, or from people in the global North, that there should be an opening where everyone is learning from each other. Because if we do that, it then means that we're able to focus on best practices as against a system that glorifies individualism, that glorifies youth, without the responsibility or without the wisdom that is passed on generationally. So next slide. And now I just really want to talk about the challenges faced by equity denied group in business conversion. And I'll speak to how, for us with Whole Women Network, for instance, when we started out, it was an informal collective. We pulled funds together using a ROSCA model. And then the first thing we did was take on advocacies against gender-based violence. Over time, we realized that there was a need to empower women economically also. And so we included financial literacy. And then during the pandemic, we created another cooperative, the Black Women Professional Co-op, which was focused more on women in the agro-food space, how to get them to, you know, start, operationalize, and scale their products to wider stores. And with these two cooperatives, there's been a lot of learning for us in terms of the challenges, right? For instance, with lack of representation for mentorship and support, that was one of the challenges we faced. We were like, who are the people that look like us that we can learn from? How do we navigate an environment that when we looked in, like, for instance, we didn't see a lot of representation, right? And I really want to commend the Canadian Worker Co-op Federation, because when we reached out to them in setting up a cooperative, what the first thing they did was give us the names of co-op developers that looked like us, right? That understood the unique challenges that we faced, and also gave us other co-op developers that were Caucasian and more experienced. So what that did for us was allow us to gradually grow into what the vision that we had. And the reason I say this is that a lot of times when people don't find at the beginning people that understand their own culture, their own systems, their own frameworks, there's often a gap in communication, and that could lead to a breakdown where groups opt out of getting the resources or getting the support that they need. Another thing we want to talk about is the lack of resources to build operational capacity and organizational effectiveness, even things like staffing and developing skills. For us, we were coming from very corporate entities. For Black Women Professional Co-op, these are women that you know, had high profile jobs, you know, business analysts, wealth advisors in different spaces. And so when we came together, there was an unlearning that needed to happen, because the capitalist system is actually quite different operationally, in terms of governance, in terms of organization. And so we were lucky to have been accepted into the Canadian Worker Co-op Academy, right? And so over the past several months, we'll be working directly with a coach, mentoring us through the whole process of setting up in a way that gives us, you know, that solid background to then scale. And then lack of access to investment capital and increased due diligence that you face when you do apply for capital. And for lack of access, we're quick to really look at that using nuanced lens, because one thing that we started noticing was that, I'll give a quick example. Members of our co-op would apply for grants. They would get accepted. There was one in particular from the government, the digital transformation grant, and then they didn't access the grant. So when we started calling each member to find out why they didn't access the grant, we realized it was a question of this lack of understanding of, you know, how their businesses were structured, and the fact that they needed to spend, right? It's like when you get a grant, sometimes you have to have a matching component. And a lot of these women didn't have the money to do that, where you spend first, get the invoicing, and then submit to get reimbursed. So what we did in that instance was to pull together resources using a ROSCA, the Rotating Savings and Credit Association. So we pulled those funds together and gave the women, each person, as a no interest loan to get the work done, create the invoices, and then submit to get the grants that they face. Next slide. I think we're heading to, okay. So quick question, I hope I'm good for time. So in terms of business conversion to SPOs, some key benefits, formal and informal economies can coexist. I use the examples of the ROSCA, the alternative finance model. What we're doing now is advocating so that it becomes mainstream, because there are hundreds of thousands of people that participate in this in Ontario across different nationalities. And then all across Canada, even millions. So what we're saying is that when equity denied groups, right, convert into social purpose organization, there has to be this awareness that what they have, what is inherent to them, the systems, the values, the frameworks, indigenous knowledge that they have, those should not be discounted. In fact, there's a lot that the formal economy can learn from equity denied group and vice versa. So this change work has to be done with a lot of humility and with a lot of openness and curiosity, rather than something that's almost been prescribed, right? Or in terms of control. Being able to convert for businesses, for us with Whole Woman, I'll speak to that. What it has done for us is allow us work in an ecosystem approach. So we're no longer a siloed organization. There are so many other cooperatives that we're connecting with. We're understanding how to operationalize the cooperative values and principles. And in doing that, we're also bringing along Afrocentric values and principles that are like really almost equivalent to what the cooperative model offers. However, the difference is that these are in our own language, and there's a power, right, to language. So for instance, when we talk about the Kwanzaa principles, right, whether you're talking of Umoja, unity, the Ubuntu model, I am because we are, right, these speak to cooperative principles and models, but in a language that's accessible to us, right? And so we encode it and we internalize it better. One thing again that we've been able to see in terms of the value of converting to a social purpose organization, specifically the cooperative model, is this idea of business succession, right? This idea of collective ownership. Instead of just one or two people owning a business and then, being overwhelmed and not being able to build a sustainable venture, what we're finding now is, especially with Whole Woman Network, as a worker cooperative, everyone has a sense of ownership. There's this sense of, everyone brings something to the table, a skill set, value, whether it's in operations, in governance. And so it allows us to build capacity, right? Because we're able to access so many different resources, so many different coaches, mentors, co-op developers, and in effect build a stronger ecosystem. And for us, I come back again to the alternative finance model, ROSCA, because that is really kind of like a foundational piece to the work that we do. And we found that through that power of community in the financial, in working this alternative financial model, we've been able to build partnership with other organizations. We've built partnership with an organization like Paro, for instance, and we offer, microloans to people in our community. We've built partnership with an organization called Wovio, and through them, we're able to digitize this ROSCA model in a way that makes it more accessible to people and weave around it a financial literacy program that is culturally informed. And so now we're running financial literacy program for youth, local students, international students, students in high school. We're running financial literacy programs for women, both on a personal level and on a professional level. And I think just go to the next slide. I'm going to be wrapping up now. And I'm just gonna invite Janielle, right, to take on from here. And before I do that, I also want to just finally reiterate that the work of whether it's business conversion to the cooperative model, right, or to any other social purpose model, is one that we should also approach with a lot of humility and openness. And the reason I say that is that the cooperative model is not a silver bullet. If we're not careful, we might replicate, the harms that happens with the capitalist model. So we have to be open to saying that when we're using the lens of justice, equity, diversity, decolonization, inclusion, and for us at BWP, we also include accessibility, right? We should use this in a way that the people that we're bringing into the room, they get a sense of belonging and they get a sense of power. That means that when you bring people in the room, there are things that must be changed internally. There are things that the cooperative sector has to change, must continue to change, so that we don't replicate the harms, the dysfunctional system that already exists. And we're able to, show people an alternative model that works for all. So Janelle, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliet. That was really amazing, so eloquent, very inspiring and passionate. Thank you so much. And thank you once again to everyone. If we could just go back to that slide. Here are some, just to this slide. Here are some links to our web pages. We have about 16 to 18 JEDI web pages, from everything ranging from what is a co-op, what is a social purpose organization, to the importance of integrating members of equity denied groups in this work. So if you know of anyone who is interested in the process, or maybe selling or buying a business, please do share these links with them. We'd much appreciate it. And of course, if you know anyone or you yourself would consider a conversion from a traditional business to a co-op or another type of social purpose organization, please do stay in touch with us. Our contact information, next slide, please. Our contact information is here on screen. And as well, before everyone leaves, I do want to share this link in the chat, which are just 4 poll questions to help us assess how we did today and how everyone was feeling about their presentation and what they learned. So if you could just take the time between now and the rest of the session to fill out those questions, that would be much appreciated. And we hope that you learned something, especially in regards to why social purpose organizations and cooperative economics are so important to members of equity denied groups. Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you both so very, very much for that. We don't have a lot of time for breakout, but I really would like us to go into the breakout rooms even for 10 minutes. Because these co-op conversations are really meant to also provide an opportunity to network. I'm also going to ask Stan to send all of those links that you shared when he sends out the recording and everything after this. So embracing that spirit of humility and curiosity and everyone bringing something to the table, I think we'll just go directly into breakout rooms. We are going to post a question posed by our speakers to you, but first just take a minute and tell everyone in your group who you are, where you're from, where you study or where you work, and what brought you here today. And we will come back for a few quick minutes at the end just to wrap up. Thank you so much. Oh, the question is, as the cooperative sector grows, how can we better champion JEDI and avoiding replicating traditional capitalistic business models? Excellent question. What are examples of best practices we can learn from co-op and non-co-op sectors? Thank you, everyone. I hope that was as invigorating for you as it was for me, even though it was very quick. Thank you for participating today. Thanks to our incredible speakers. My mind is whirring with ideas, and I hope all of you have the same effect. We will be sharing a link to the recording of this session soon. Stan usually gets it out fairly quickly. He will also share all of those links. And if anyone didn't get a chance to do the follow-up poll, then he will also include that link as well, if that's okay with our speakers. Our next co-op conversation will be on Wednesday, October 4th, same time. The speaker and details will be announced via our digital and social media channels in the coming days. So for more on the Canadian Center for the Study of Cooperatives events and goings on, you can visit our website, our Twitter/X, our Facebook, our LinkedIn, and our email. Thank you again to everyone. It's great to kick off this fall season with such an insightful and engaging talk. And I look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you so much.